So we've had a wonderful tour of the lab here. It's so incredible. Can you share a little bit about the story of how this wet lab was established and, you know, how students are able to use it?
Yeah, so when I originally was hired to teach here, I inherited a 1960s science classroom with no running water as far as fish tanks.
Wow.
I had one class of oceanography with about 12 to 15 students in it. And so that was back in 2001. Luckily, we were able to grow a program. I was able to borrow, beg, and steal fish tanks and anything that would hold water to increase the number of animals that we had. And then we started into the aquaculturing fin fish. We had some limited success, but students came in droves. And so we had an opportunity to do a capital improvement bond. And at the time, administration came to me and they said, if you had an opportunity to design your dream classroom, you know, what would it look like? And I said, well, how much money do you have and what part of the building is it going on to? And they said, well, don't worry about the money so much, but it's going to go off the end of your old classroom. So I went downstairs and I literally paced off the footprint of what they said it was going to be. And I went on graph paper and drew up what my dream classroom would look like. And I gave it to the architects and he basically just took a tour of it. So it was incredibly fortunate. It was an unbelievable experience to be able to literally take a piece of graph paper and watch it unfold to what we have now. So that's the very quick 22-year transition from when I started to where we were today.
And now, Rachael, you are working as well to help take care of the animals. Can you talk a little bit about what that looks like?
Yeah, so I have a very fortunate position to be able to manage that lab that we just walked around in. My job is to maintain the lab, but also I get to work with the kids. So I'm not a formal teacher, however, my experiences in the classroom are with the students, but also taking care of all the animals and systems that we saw, earlier today.
And, I was so impressed talking to the students about how this curriculum works for them. You kind of give them, it sounds like, a basic intro into oceanography, and then they can, as they get more interested, get more specialized. If you could talk us through that a little bit.
Yeah, so we have a progression of marine science classes. It starts with oceanography, which is an intro level course. It's taught basic principles of the ocean, experiences with the ocean, and then from there, students that show interest and aptitude are recommended for the aquaculture course, which is a full-year program, and it teaches marine ornamental aquaculture. So the facility that you were just in is also a fully functioning marine ornamental aquaculture. So all the little tiny clownfish and gobies and things that you saw in there were all raised by students and Rachael through the aquaculture program. And then from there, if they haven't graduated yet, they would take hatchery management. So hatchery management is basically seniors that have gone through the other programs, and they help Rachael to maintain and manage the facility that's there. Last year, we were fortunate enough to bring the marine research program to the rosters, and so this is only year 2 of the program officially on the books. And so you don't have to go through the normal progression. You can come into the marine research program at any grade, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th.
And so that's what the students that we met today
Yeah,
are
so
involved
the
in.
students today talked specifically about their marine research program, but both of them, Emma is currently in the oceanography program. Olivia took oceanography last year and is in my aquaculture course this year. So those students have taken advantage of the full suite that we offer here.
And other students, can they pick their own research projects, or so the world is their
Yeah,
limit?
so the world is their lab, and then we refine them to what we can actually do. So the hard part is getting the students, because research is such a brand new course for everybody here. They don't really know what research is, and so some of the students come in and just say, I don't really know. Some of them come in like Olivia and says, I want to work with sharks. And so at least the students that come in and say, I want to work with jellyfish, or I want to work with a live animal, or I don't want to work with a live animal. So I think it was Olivia that had talked about some of the other students, they're utilizing data that was collected by others or other means. And so we have that as well. Students that say, I don't want the responsibility, I can't take care of live animals. So we try to get them on the map, and then try to get at what is it that they're genuinely interested in, and then try to funnel them towards a project that we can realistically, accomplish in our lab, given, their time constraints, their, educational ability. And so I think, so far we have, I think about 45 students on the roster in the research program this year. And for the most part, they're all pretty happy with how their adventure has played out this year.
Yeah, it seems like such an amazing opportunity. And even hearing Emma talk about like her research and then how she was saying that, she wasn't qualifying certain kinds of data, but then you kind of helped her. Like, you can see how as a student, as a teenager, having that amount of time to work on something and to have these kinds of resources, like it really must help develop their kind of scientific mind.
Yeah, I mean, I'm fortunate that I'm able to help conduct authentic research myself outside of school with South Fork Natural History Museum, and been able to amass a really great collaboration of real scientists. And so, although I don't consider myself a real scientist, I get to work with a lot of really high-powered, high-class scientists. And so I'm learning from them and through the process. And so I want my students to have as authentic of a master's degree or PhD program as we can give them in the facility and the setting and the time that we have. A lot of students are frustrated right now because they didn't get to collect their data. Like, they're right there, but we had to put a hard stop on because they need to write their papers and give their presentations and stuff. So I said, I'm asking you to do multiple years of work in 8 months' time. So it's, don't beat yourself up too bad that you didn't have a chance to finish it. But luckily, like Emma and Olivia were able to come back and finish this year. So they started last year, and then were able to come back and actually collect their data this year. So you really need kind of like almost 2 years to be able to complete the whole project.
And is there a singular focus of the lab? There's so many different kinds of projects, like the mangroves. If you want to kind of talk about some of the focus and the successes that you guys have seen.
Yeah, so in regards to what the lab has to offer for research projects, it's been a lot. So the research class started last year while we were still hybrid, but also last year we did a complete renovation of the lab. So with starting to hear some of the topics the kids were talking about last year, we were like, okay, in our renovation, let's try and make this more aspects of the lab to cater to different types of marine organisms, but then also be able to make them interchangeable so that if we have some kids with interest in octopus this year, but maybe we can repurpose that system for mud snails next year. So we wanted to be able to be more adaptive to, whatever the students are interested in, because in our experience, if they're interested, they're going to come and they're going to show up and they're going to want to collect their data, and they're going to, ultimately they'll benefit as well as we'll benefit having them there. I would say we're able to do anything hands-on related to the animals that we're able to bring in. I talk to the kids a lot about ethics and what's realistic and what's not realistic for us to have in the lab to be able to use for education and use for projects, and what's the right thing to do. And sometimes they're not comfortable, and a lot of times I'm not comfortable, but having those conversations with them is hopefully being impactful, that they can take on into their life outside of the lab.
And you mentioned to me earlier that you have a rule in the lab that you don't take any animals in unless you are kind of committing to have that animal for its lifetime, or it's something that is like being rehabilitated.
Yeah, for the lab, we really I'm okay with taking an animal in if it's going to be used for a specific reason, for a project, for education, to convey a marine concept that might be, we're talking about in oceanography this year or in aquaculture. But if we're just having an animal come in because people want it in there, that's not really the focus of what we're doing. And that's not beneficial to the animal or to us. And, having those conversations and going through that thought process, I think, is really beneficial for everyone involved.
Yeah, because a lot of times we'll get, in community, when the community is open to come, this is an amazing aquarium, or hey, have you gone to see the aquarium? Well, that facility, when you initially walk in, might resemble an aquarium because there's animals in tanks, but it is far from an aquarium. Like, that is our classroom. We're just fortunate enough to have that as our classroom. So nothing comes into that lab unless it's like, as Rachael said, is being utilized in some educational component.
And
What?
sorry.
No.
I just touched back quick. So Olivia, when you spoke to her, had mentioned that she would have to convince me if she wanted to bring another shark into the lab. So every year we do get a lot of interest to bring in animals like jellyfish or seahorses, and we do have seahorses currently, but that took 2 years for me to be able to say yes, because we're not going to bring an animal into the lab. That a seahorse or a jellyfish, they need to eat 7 days a week, and I'm only here 6 days a week. So that conversation with the student is, okay, how are we going to feed an animal that needs to be fed 7 days a week? So we had a student make an automatic wet food feeder in order to overcome this issue. So, it's not a hard no for all the animals, but let's do everything we can, and then, okay, maybe I'll give in.
Well, then imagine you're kind of thinking of it with the more practicality of like not being really excited 16-year-old who's like,
Right.
I want all the animals. What have been some of the craziest animals, that students have tried to petition for, or projects in general?
Crocodiles.
Turtles.
Ugh,
We get a lot of
the
turtles.
worst
Why don't
turtles.
you like turtles? Do they get diseased easily? Or no?
Well,
Go ahead, Claire.
we would
Why don't
only
we like
technically
turtles?
be able to take in freshwater turtles, and the lab is completely marine as it is right now, unless a student comes in with a project that convinces me like we should set up a freshwater system otherwise, which they can. Hasn't been done yet. And any marine turtle has to, we can't have it. It has to be released into the wild. So turtles are off limits, but we
Yeah.
get a lot of interest
Oh, it's like
in turtles.
illegal.
Yeah. And there's, like Rachel was saying, there's no way our lab is anywhere close to being capable of handling a
A
marine turtle.
And can you, what are some of the highlights that have come from this program, and how have you seen students, maybe incorporate, at least with like the oceanography and even just having the lab, incorporate that into their further studies?
Yeah, so one thing that I really think we pride ourselves on in there is that students have conversations and learning that is real for them. It's not forced. It's not like we're forcing them to read this story and try to get a concept. We're not trying to force them to learn this math problem. They inherently have to gather more information to convince Rachael to bring this animal in. Well, that involves reading and getting research and getting yourself organized. They need to calculate the volume of a tank because they want to lower the pH a particular percentage point in a particular amount of time. Okay, well, how are you going to do that? So then it forces them to go find the math problem to make it happen. So it's taking the concepts that they're learning in these other courses that they may or may not be really understanding or getting or even liking, and it's forcing them, even though they're not being forced, they want to do this now. So it's taking the learning that's happening in other places and making it real for them in front. They're genuinely interested in having to know the answer and figure things out.
So Emma, I can't believe you're a sophomore and you've already been researching your project for, how long has it been?
2 years.
2 years. And I'm going to pronounce this wrong. So food preference of the striped burrfish, which is also known as the Chilamygdra sophi.
I think so. I'm not really
Okay.
100% on the pronunciation of that.
And how did you land upon this topic?
So it started, my first question was if they puffed up with air and water. And I found the answer of that online. So then I went to the anatomy of the pufferfish, which then didn't really work for me. So then I decided do they decide if they want different foods? So I went with shellfish and finfish. And so that got me to my final question.
And how has, obviously students all over the country have experienced these changes in their learning thanks to the pandemic. How had that affected your research plans?
Since I started with my question last year, it was a little hard for me to stay focused when I was at home doing remote learning. But then once I got back to school full time, it was easier for me to get on top of my work, and it was just easier for me to do my work. Yeah.
And you'd mentioned to me earlier that you'd seen the pufferfish in the wet lab here, and that kind of sparked your interest initially. How has it been now that you have your own fish, you're conducting your own experiments on them?
It's really great having my own fish. It would be a little different doing the research with the fish in the lab since it's had different, the same foods I use for my experiment. So it was easier for me to use two different new pufferfish. So I could get a new food preference for both of them and see.
And do they have different food preferences?
Yeah, both of them have different food preferences.
That's so interesting. So can you tell us a little bit about the fish and their food preferences?
So their behavior is a little different. One of them is more kind of like skittish, and like if you would go to that side of the tank, it would swim to the other side of the tank. And then the other one would come up to you, and it knew, like on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, it knew it was time to get fed when I came in. So, and the other one just didn't really care.
Really?
Yeah.
Do you have a nickname for them?
No, I just pufferfish 1 and 2. I don't really have a name for them.
You're probably supposed to keep like that scientific distance, I imagine. And what are their food preferences?
So the pufferfish, the smaller pufferfish that's in the lab, she liked. I have it on my computer. She liked herring more than shrimp and blue claw and striped bass, and the other pufferfish liked shrimp more than the other. So yeah, they both had different. It was really crazy.
Was that expected, that result?
I expected them to have kind of a similar food preference, not one shellfish and one finfish, but yeah, it was really crazy.
Yeah, because I guess when we think about animals, like you don't think of them as being like, oh, I like, Diet Coke or I like Pepsi or something. But and then was there anything else that's been really surprising with your findings?
Not really, other than just the fact that they both had different food preferences.
Cool. And then so this project will take you through the end of the year, and then can you continue your research, or how does that look?
I'm going to take the research class again next year, but I think I do want to still work with the pufferfish, but I have to find another question, since one of the questions last year that I had was already answered, and the other one that I came up with was answered as well.
Can you give us a hint as to what that might be? Or
it's going to take a while for me to figure out what type of question I want to do.
Well, thank you so much, Emma. This has been so interesting. Is there anything else you want to add about your research, or?
It was really a lot of fun, and I'm really happy I got to join the program. Yeah, so this is the tank I used for my research, and so this little box where the water's going through, that's kind of the middle of the tank. So I had these 2 plastic egg crate dividers, which are these crates that have holes in them so the water can circulate through and not get all gross. And so then I had the dividers on either side of the little box, and I would put using a clip, this is the Puff Feeder 3000, as I named it when I made it with my dad. I would put that here. Hold on.
Sure.
Oh, thank you. I would attach it here, and the fish, I would sit here for some time, and I would just wait and see what the fish went to, and I would have my computer over here, and I would type down what time the fish went to it, how long it stayed at the food for, and then like if it did any changes. And I'd have that there and the other one here.
Okay, so and you did, I know you mentioned you did 9 weeks, 2 9-week sessions.
Yeah.
So, and every time it would be all the 4 different kinds of food, or?
It would just be the 2. So I would have, for example, like the first 9 weeks, blue claw and striped bass. I would have the blue claw and striped bass.
Oh, because one fish would be here and the other fish would be there.
Yeah.
Got it.
And then, it went on for 18 weeks. And it was so much fun just seeing like what their preferences were. And the first few weeks of my data, I couldn't really calculate that because it was new for me, and it was harder for me. I didn't really know how research went, and I wrote down what the fish went to. I didn't write down the time or how long it stayed there, so I wasn't able to calculate that data into my data table. So then Mr. Metzer suggested that I write down how long they stayed there for, and that prompts to my mind, oh, that makes so much more sense where I'm going to be making graphs. So it was so much easier, and then just adding the times was a pain, but
yeah, but that's such a great thing to learn, I think, as a scientist or aspiring scientist.
Yes.
And so you did the first section, you did blue claw and striped bass, and then the second portion
was shrimp and herring.
Okay. And you mentioned that you ran out of blue claw.
Yeah, so we had to switch to shrimp instead of the crab. I mean, we could have used other crabs, but I decided, me and Rachael both decided that I think it would be better if we used 2 different types of food.
And you mentioned that one of the fish went on hunger strike.
Yeah, the other fish, they just wouldn't really eat. She would be swimming around the tank and just like ignoring the food. I'd be like, come on, let's eat. And then there'd be huge lists of data for this fish, and then just like the two, like it was crazy. Their behavior is so different.
And how did she break her hunger strike?
Well, I think after the research, since they were getting fed like a little bit of food, and after the research, when we put her into the other tank and fed her the same days at the same time, she ate the food, and she even took some of the other fish's food earlier when I fed them.
Oh, okay.
So now she's starting to eat more, which is better. So
Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
I think success of what I've seen in the research program in the last 2 years, and in other classes too, but specifically with the research kids, is it's a pretty proud moment when you see another student telling a different student what their project is, and them asking each other questions about, well, how did you think of that, and how are you collecting data to figure that out, and to like be on the sidelines and watch that happen in front of you is a really cool moment. And to have them ask the questions that we've been asking them for months is a really cool thing to see, and I think it's successful.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great measure of success, when students are teaching themselves those things, because then you know that they will continue to do that in life. Is the program, I imagine, is it very popular with students?
So we haven't looked at the numbers for next year, but up until this point, it has been. It started out that I taught all the marine science classes, so there were 3 sections of oceanography, typically 2 sections of aquaculture, and 1 section of hatchery management. So here at Southampton, we teach five periods, and so that was my 5 periods, and most of the classes were fairly full. We're now up to 3 teachers teaching the different courses. We've added the marine research program. So I think our roster this year is 150 students, about 150 students, taught by 3 different teachers, 1 esteemed aquarist.
That's incredible.
So the lab has a class in it every period of the day now.
What amazing success.
And then those that sneak in on the sides to do whatever it is that they're trying to do.
And can you share a little bit about the Mangrove Project? I've heard that that's like very unique, and I know that it's really difficult to grow mangroves.
Yes.
So we don't really have it's not really a project.
Okay.
So that tank, we call it the tide tank. And
Okay.
when it was originally set up, the water would come in and out of it. It didn't follow any like actual real tidal, but the water would come in and out. And so I had the beach there. And my thought was that the concept of that tank is that it would be representative of our local bay environment. So with the tide and the sand, we could plant the different grasses that grow in the intertidal zone. We could basically build it, and it could be an opportunity for not only teaching what our local environment, intertidal environment looks like, but also could be available for research if and when the program grew. Unfortunately, we couldn't get the grasses to grow that we have locally here. So the next best thing we thought was, well, let's try a tropical intertidal zone, which mangroves work. So we were able to acquire some just seeds. They were literally seeds that we stuck in the sand, and it was like, well, we got a leaf, and then it grew, and then a branch, and now we're in there with machetes almost every other day. Seems like, chopping them down. And we've actually been contacted by other aquariums and stuff asking, like, hey, what's your secret message? Like, give us your protocols. We're like, it's top secret. We don't.
The plastic alligators.
It's the plastic alligators. That's the secret weapon. So that's sort of the Mangrove Project. I was looking early. I'm always looking because they've been established and they're growing well. I would love to see flowers, and actually have them, produce seeds. So that's why I'm always looking to see, like, am we getting any flowers yet? So it's not. So it's just sort of a one of those haphazard, successful situations that I don't know why they're doing so well, but we're happy that they are.
And it seems like, obviously you have like sharks from Indonesia and, all over the world, the marine species. But it also sounds like you're trying to incorporate part of like the East End as well. Can you talk a little bit about that, or like how that's maybe shaped some parts of the lab?
So we definitely, as Rachael had talked about, want to try to keep as many doors open to research projects and ideas and things like that. So some of the projects that didn't get mentioned yet do involve local species. So we have a periwinkle project that's going on. We have a mud snail project that's going on. both really, really great projects. So the one student has been humming to periwinkles since she was like a little teeny kid. And so she wanted to find out if, and when she hummed to them, they would come out of the shell. So, the thought was that they were whatever it was. So it was just something that she had as a young experience. And so now she comes to, and she was like, oh, I know this is crazy, but I was like, no, this is great. And so what she ended up finding, like, she's testing if they're attracted to the sound of photosynthesis. So the idea is that, the bubbles that are coming off of the food for the snails produces a sound that she found at some frequency and volume, and so she's got a speaker underneath there, and all the periwinkles are numbered, and so she plays the sound of photosynthesis and is looking to see if there's any sort of like attraction. So like crazy. So there's a local East End. The mud snail project is global warming. So her interest is looking at their movements. Are they moving more in warmer waters than versus cooler waters? And so the implication is, well, if they're moving more, they might need more food, and then how does that work? Like, so these kids are really playing with some big ideas and concepts.
So Olivia, you are working on using spines to age sharks. If you could talk a little bit about your project.
So for my project, I wanted to see if I can use shark vertebrae to age them, and then Mr. Metzer and I came up with the idea to utilize the microscope downstairs. It's a scanning electron microscope. So we found a way to incorporate that into the project.
And what is a scanning electron microscope?
It's a very expensive, high-tech microscope that uses like electrons to like produce an image.
Oh, wow.
So I wanted to incorporate that because no one really knows that it's down there.
Oh,
So
it's really cool. And does it allow you to, like, it would allow you to take a photo of a fish in a different way than a typical microscope? Like, it could still be alive, or?
No, so you put it on this like little slide kind of, and then you put it into a door, seal it, and then you look at it on a computer that's like next to it, and then see what the image produces.
Oh, cool. And can you talk a little bit about what you have here?
So these are the species of the dogfish, and then I did a bamboo shark. These are the vertebrae, so here. So this is the vertebrae. This is a stained one with the crystal violet. This is one that we cut, and then I just labeled it. And then this is one that is not stained and just a whole vertebrae.
And do you stain them so then you can see the vertebrae better?
So some of the stains that are they're mainly used to enhance like the calcium like rings that are in the vertebrae, or like any kind of like medical field or something.
And then if you could just talk a little bit about the findings that
so it was actually really cool. So I have like images here. So this is on the scanning electron microscope, and this is a stained vertebrae of dogfish 1.
Wow.
And it shows that you can see the vertebral rings.
And that tells you how old the dogfish is then?
Yes.
And so how old is this one?
This one is 6 approximately.
Wow. And so what about the vertebrae? Like, how does that work? If you could share a little
So
bit.
over time, during like seasonal changes, there are like deposits, because like seasonal changes and everything. So around a certain amount of like time, a new like ring will appear. So kind of like hibernation kind of, but it like
Okay, so like it'll,
ring forms.
and you'll see the difference because of like the difference in the food or the environment.
Yeah, like if there are rings that are like closer together, you see how they start like spreading out. And then like the circle in the middle, you can kind of see it there. That is like the birth ring. That is like the start, and then you see how they.
And were you expecting to find this out?
No, I didn't have an idea of if the microscope was going to work. So it was really, really cool.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So that's the first time that anyone's used an electron, I'm going to say the name wrong.
A scanning electron microscope,
Okay.
using stains and this species of shark.
And if you were kind of looking to the outside world, do you think what kind of like practical applications could you see this having?
In the medical field, probably.
In what ways?
Using a microscope, there's so many things in like the medical field that you can use it for.
You mean with the staining?
Yeah, like the staining, because I was researching and it had something to do with like mouse, like embryos, like staining them with this type of stain, and there's a lot of different things.
So is that how you got the idea then to stain the vertebrae?
Yeah, I've seen things that it could kind of enhance the ring, so I was wondering of what it might do.
Cool. And so if they're not stained, then you don't really see the...
So the staining for some of the vertebrae actually like enhanced it. All of these up top are all the ones that are stained. So like this one is not stained, but it's still, the rings are still very prominent.
Yeah, definitely. And so I know from our talks earlier that, you've been very passionate about marine biology and, you love the wet lab. If you could kind of talk about, how you ended up doing this research course and, you're a junior, how that has gone for you.
Yeah, so ever since I was little, I've wanted to be around sharks. It's something, I don't know where it came from. It's just every time like I was around like my grandfather, because he's a fisherman, so I was just obsessed with sharks. And then I came here freshman year and I heard that there was a wet lab and like a marine program, so I really wanted to do that. It just seemed so fun, and then when I first went in there I was like in heaven. It was just so amazing, and now I want to go to college to pursue biology.
Cool. It sounds like the school makes it really, it kind of facilitates that interest in marine biology.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if I could spend every period in the lab, I would.
Oh,
it's my favorite time. I just love going in there.
And do you have any plans for a research project next year?
Definitely something with sharks. I have no idea what I'm going to do yet.
Do you think I know there's live sharks in the lab. Is there like a limit on how many live sharks they can have in the tank? Or can you like get one for next year?
I don't know. I mean, I would love to convince Rachael, but we'll see.
Oh, that's who you have to...
Yeah, it's Rachael.
Got it. I know, because it's amazing how much, how many projects are going on there. I imagine it's like competitive to kind of vie for space.
Yeah, there are so many projects going on at once. Some people are using live animals. Some are just looking on their laptop and looking at like data from like other people and like making a project out of that, or like looking at Mr. Metzger's data from when he goes out on the boat, looking at stuff from that. So there's so many things that kids can be doing.
It's cool too that there's like both aspects, because obviously with the wet lab, that's to be able to be hands-on. What have been some of the challenges that you've had with this project?
In the beginning, I was like doing the dissections. I was like nervous to like, because I've never done anything like that before. But after the first one, it was like so easy.
So these started as a whole shark?
Yeah.
Oh wow, how big were they?
The biggest one was like this big, I think. Yeah, around this.
Oh, cool. And was it cool? Did you like it in the end, or?
I enjoyed it. It was really fun.
Because in some ways, if you're into that, you get to look
at like the anatomy of the shark. It was really cool.
Wow, that's amazing. So you did all 5 or 6 of those?
Yeah, all 5 of the dissections. Yeah.
Oh, wow. And were there any other challenges, related maybe to the pandemic or?
Yeah, during the pandemic, it was very difficult to like learn. Like Emma said, it was just so distracting, and it was just not fun learning everything through a screen. Like in the lab, the best part is you get a hands-on experience, and you get to, do water quality or just like see the fish, feed them, and you can't really do that like over looking at a screen.
Yeah,
so.
And it seems like such a creative space, the wet lab as well. Like I want to go move into that wet lab. It's so many cool things happening. I imagine that you kind of would miss that like collaboration.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you want to share about this project? Like maybe a surprising finding?
I'm just like so happy that I was able to like do my project, and like what I had in mind, and Mr. Metzger and Rachael were just like, that's so cool. Anytime I got like a interesting finding of that, like when we finally saw the rings, it was like everyone was jumping up and down, and like
Oh,
it was,
that's so
yeah.
cool.
So everyone was like very supportive, and it's just like we have a really fun time.
You know, our facility, as big as it is pretty small. So like for us, you know, we get asked, well, how come you're not working with, you know, our local oyster or our local clam or scallop? And our facility isn't really big enough to deal with, you know, our local clams, oysters, and scallops. And it's harder to raise finfish than it is shellfish. Aquaculturally, there's a lot more steps that are involved to be successful. But they learn all the basics for shellfish in trying to raise finfish. So, and you know, we can raise marine ornamentals in our facility, completing the life cycle. So we have parents that have babies that grow up and are parents again. We can do all that in that small facility that we have. So these non-native species lend themselves to the teaching concepts that we have here. But it directly connects to any of the local aquaculture or you know, just being good stewards. They know how hard it is to keep things alive in a fish tank. You know, and if you were to ask any of them, well, you know, why don't you take your garbage from your lunch and just throw it in the fish tank? Like none of them, it wouldn't even begin to enter their brain. It's like, all right, well then why do you do that out the window of your car? Or why do you leave your garbage on the beach? The ocean's just a big fish tank. And so you can start to have those like, whoa. And so that's how our program, although initially involves animals from all over the world, can help to make direct impacts to the local environment.
I love that. I think it's so important to, you know, get kids on that page. Is there anything else that you guys want to share about the program or maybe the research projects?
I just want to thank the community and the school district and the administrators and the students that it takes all of those pulling on a rope in the same direction to allow us to have the facility that we have. And so I really believe that the success of our program is a result of every player that is part of a public school system putting their differences aside, getting behind a common cause, and doing everything in their power to make sure that it's maximized. So I just want to say thanks.
Yeah, I agree. As you can tell, there's not many people who have a job like I do. So I'm very fortunate to be able to come to work every day. And, you know, they say you don't work a day when you love what you do ever again, which is true. And, you know, that's how I feel in this lab. And, you know, when I took the job, I wanted to, you know, continue working with fish, which is my previous careers. But, you know, getting able to work with the kids and then sharing in their passions has been something that's been really, really fulfilling for me, and it's something that I look forward to doing every day with all 150 kids that walk into that lab, and, you know, problem solving with them, and, you know, hopefully I can help them work and think critically and, you know, have those meaningful conversations we talked about earlier. I think is something I really appreciate, and I'm very thankful to be where I'm at, and like what Greg said, with the community, with the district, you know, everyone that's involved, it takes a village, and for us it's really amazing.